Straight to business now. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange experienced an uptick in trade this morning. The local markets closed in the red on Friday amid sell-off in industrial sector stocks. The rand also ended the week stronger against the US dollar. The international Brent crude oil price per barrel is the only market indicator that opened negatively at $90 off the price level. The rand opened relatively significantly stronger against all the three major foreign currencies at 18.96 rand to a dollar and later improved further to 18.90 by 10 a.m. compared to last Friday's opening rate of 18.99 rand. And at this point, to discuss the latest market developments in South Africa, I'm being joined by Bonke Dumisa. He's an independent economist. Bonke, it's nice to have you on the news.
Yes, good afternoon to you and your viewership of News Central.
Thank you very much. Now, what are the main factors that contributed to the recent gains of the rand against the major markets?
Okay, let me start on a lighter note. The win of the South African rugby team, the Springboks, against France has absolutely nothing to do with the strengthening of the rand today. The rand started strengthening last Thursday. And the reason why it has strengthened, it is because it's not actually the rand strengthening. It's more a question of the US dollar weakening. The US dollar has weakened because the Federal Open Market Committee of the US Federal Bank has decided not to hike the federal interest rates, and yet signaling that they are going to hike them in the near future, which is nearly the same issue here in South Africa. And you must remember, when people expect the interest rates to go up, then they buy more of the currency of that country and more of the bonds of that country, because they believe then that they may actually benefit from higher interest rates. So if they don't materialize, they shift their money to other currencies. And that is what has happened with the rand. And in most instances, then what happens is, if ever the US dollar increases or depreciates, it affects the other currencies, the UK pound sterling and the euro. So as the US dollar weakened, so has the other currencies from these other countries. But we also believe that the rand is also strengthening, because you remember that in May, the rand was highly weakened because of political factors, when they were trying to pressure South Africa not to allow Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, to come to South Africa. So when it did not come here, it's still taking long to take back the rand to where it was before then. So it is more a question of the US dollar weakening rather than the rand strengthening.
So, Bonke, I'm a bit concerned here. If you say that, or you're attributing the rise or the appreciation of the South African rand solely to the depreciation of the dollar, does that mean that there were no economic policies whatsoever by the SARB or by the Cyril Ramaphosa administration that could have upped the performance of the rand against other currencies?
Good question. I was just placing the context. What is happening is the South African National Treasury is a very effective treasury, one of the best rated in the world. And some of the decisions they are taking in the economy, I mean, for example, the circular that they sent out to government departments to say they must trim down on their expenditure, which the trade unions call austerity measures. I don't call them austerity measures, is showing that the South African government is not really keen to push their GDP, their debt to GDP ratios, which are going to weaken the rand further and make the South African economy, that is the sovereign, to be downgraded even further within the junk status that we're already in. So that is one of the things which encourages the external investors to keep on buying the South African bonds and to have faith in the rand. But what I was emphasizing is that it's more of the external factors than the internal factors which are affecting the rand. In fact, in a recent speech by the Minister of Finance in South Africa, he emphasized this point that the South African economy is facing more of the microeconomic issues than the macroeconomic issues. So long as we play our microeconomic issues well, then the macroeconomic issues are not going to actually make things much worse for us as South Africans.
So still talking about external factors, earlier on you talked about the Russia-Ukraine crisis and how it affected whether or not President Vladimir Putin would be arrested in South Africa, and that also put a pressure on the South African rand. Now we are seeing this onslaught or this war between Israel and Palestine, or Hamas, as the case is. And we know that when it comes to oil production and distribution, that particular axis of the globe channels a lot and has a say in that. And of course, we have seen the global price of oil rising as a result of these imbalances and instability and being recorded as regards infightings and wars between these countries. So do you think that if this continues in the next few months or thereabouts, it might eventually see to a sharp drop, or it might affect the South African rand negatively? What are your predictions?
Yes, if ever this, in fact, I don't call it a war because you cannot really have Hezbollah or Hamas fighting Israel there. It is a question of Israel really going to Palestine. If that whole impasse continues for a long time, and it does have an impact on the oil production, which I doubt. I mean, both of them cannot really affect the prices of crude oil. The mere fact that it rose significantly to over $90 today, it had nothing to do with what is happening in Israel and Palestine, but it had more to do with the OPEC countries still having the appetite to see the prices higher. And anytime the Brent crude oil prices rise significantly, then that forces the South African prices of petrol and diesel to go up, which adds and influences the food inflation and the overall inflation higher in South Africa. And if ever we cannot contain our inflation, then we may have the South African Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee hiking the repo rate. The repo rate is an equivalent of the federal interest rate, hiking it even higher. And yet it is already significantly affecting the cost of living in South Africa and the cost of doing business in South Africa. Hence, everyone is praying that we don't see other serious increases in the Brent crude oil prices, because we want to keep our 4.8% inflation rate at that level and not higher than our target inflation rate of 3 to 6% in South Africa.
Okay, well said. Bonke, Dumisa, thank you so much for talking to us.
You're welcome.